We all have heard of C.H. Spurgeon, I think. Most people have. But most people haven't heard of James Spurgeon, who was his brother. And James was a systems guy. And C.H. would say, I couldn't do what I do if James didn't do what he did. And Dudley is consistently telling me that
really,
Tim, I could not do what I do if you didn't do what you do.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pastor to Pastor with Dave Stone podcast. I'm Dave Stone. I'm your host. I'm excited that you have found us and that you're here. If you don't already follow the podcast, you can do so by just clicking subscribe on our YouTube channel at The Focused Pastor. You also can go to Instagram at Pastor to Pastor Podcast and begin to follow us there. There's a lot of different ways you can listen, but we just encourage you to pass the word along to others because we're relatively new, but it's a growing podcast. It's reaching a large number of Christian leaders, and we're glad that you're in that number. And today I'm really pumped up about this because it's another Tuesday. We get to drop a brand new episode, and this one is a special one because we haven't talked a whole lot about this in the past couple of months. And rarely does this topic take center stage, but it absolutely should. We're going to talk about what it's like to lead from the second chair. Now, every lead pastor feels the weight of preaching and of vision casting, but right next to them, there's often someone who doesn't get as much fanfare and isn't in the spotlight, and yet their job is equally important. They're not as visible, but they are as valuable. And I'm talking about the associates. I'm talking about assistants. I'm talking about directors or executive pastors. Those people who carry a huge weight and they're behind the scenes often organizing, managing, supporting, and they do it all with a heart for servant leadership. I was an assistant pastor for, I guess it was 17 years. And yes, you do play second fiddle, and you are in the background, and you're not in the limelight. I'll never forget going to a conference one time, and they would put your name on the tag, but they also put your title underneath it. And it didn't have enough room to put assistant minister, or in my case, that time I was called associate minister, and my exact title was preaching associate. And it didn't have room to write preaching associate out. It didn't have enough characters. And so it cut off at a really bad spot. It cut off at preaching ASSO. And that's where it stopped. That's the kind of respect that we get when we're in the second chair. Can I hear an amen? I heard it from all over the country. Well, you're going to enjoy our conversation today with Tim Winters because Tim Winters is one of my good friends for the past 20 years. He's been a close friend of mine. He serves as the executive pastor at Shepherd of the Hills Church, where he has been there for over 33 years as the executive pastor, serving with Dudley Rutherford, the lead pastor. And Tim is the real deal. He is sharp, he's steady, he's a deeply humble leader who models what it's like to serve with the senior pastor, not beneath the senior pastor. And so this podcast is for lead pastors so that you can see how it is that you can communicate value to your assistants and all those people who support you. But this podcast is also for those of you who sit in that second seat, or you are an assistant or a key volunteer. It's for you as well so that you can find out how it is that you can help advance the mission of the church. So listen in. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with Tim Winters. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being a part of this. And you have garnered the respect of everyone who has ever met you because you have this ability to be like a swan, that everything just looks like it's just flowing. I don't know what's going on under the water if you're paddling like crazy, but you are smooth sailing. And because you have this level of peace, it just kind of transcends and it kind of goes over to the other people. Do you hear that a lot?
I've never been called a swan before. That's a new one. And but my feet are paddling very fast under the water. That is a good analogy because what you see on top of the water is very smooth, especially in churches. People look and wonder how things are going so calm, and they're really not. You know, when you can look behind the curtain and see what it takes to run a large church. There's a whole lot of paddling as quickly as you can, and then just relying on God to do the rest of it. But yeah, some chaos down there under the water.
Well, I think that you just described most every church, small, large, whatever it might be. And let's talk about that, because when you came to Shepherd of the Hills, there in Porter Ranch, California, 33 years ago, and so you were there. There were only how many staff members? Tell us about what the staff was like then, and how you've seen it go through different stages of change and where you are now.
Right. The first day I started, it was our senior pastor, Dudley Rutherford, who I'd been friends with before. I met him back in Iowa. Our lives intersect in a lot of different places, but he was a senior pastor. He had a secretary named Lori Lewis. And then shortly after that, Drew Sherman came on. So it was Dudley, Drew, a secretary named Lori, myself. And that was the staff of this church. It was running about 350 people. And in a lot of ways, it was a lot of fun. We would go to movies a couple of days a week, play golf one day a week, and then have a church on the weekends and call on people at night. That was church. And that's been a long time ago. Yeah.
I remember it. I mean, my elders, they expected me. I was a youth minister. I had to make 8 home visits every single week, and I had to report that I had made those 8 home visits and list the names of the people. I guess they didn't trust me, Tim.
Same here.
But I had to say where I had been and who I had seen.
Yeah. And out here in California, we had these things called Thomas guides, which were literally 2 inches thick of maps. And you go to the letter and the page to find the house, and we didn't have GPS back then.
Well, in Louisville, it wasn't as thick, but that's what I started with as well. And you would go to that page, and it was amazing how you would start to learn those neighborhoods backwards and forwards because you didn't have GPS. It forced you. That's old school. Yeah. I remember it well.
I remember learning which ones had pie, which ones had food, and I'd call them in more often.
That's just ministry gifts right there. That's God preparing you to use those gifts to your advantage so that you could get a good meal.
100%.
Now, you saw the church begin to grow, go through different stages. And what were some of the different hats that you wore? Were you always over the staff, or how did that come about? Was that something that gradually came about?
No, it's pretty unique in that when I first started, Dudley brought me on as executive pastor. That was my title. I'd never heard of it before.
Really? 33 years ago, the title was executive pastor, and now everybody has followed your lead.
Yeah. And I remember going to Mike Graham back at the time. You remember Mike?
Sure.
Because he was executive pastor, and went to him and said, what do I do? What does that mean? And he said, well, when I started, Bob just said, you take over everything you want, and I will tell you when to stop. So I did the same thing with Dudley. I just started taking everything off his plate that I could, and I didn't stop till I got to preaching sermons and casting vision, and it's been that way ever since. I'm pretty much the chief of staff. I'm over the ministries, the finances. I mean, he's ultimately over everything, but I report directly to him, and he's left the rest up to me. And it's grown a lot, you know. It's grown a crazy amount of what that means exactly. And we're actually today not able to do that quite as much. I have a couple executive pastors under me, just because the organization is too wide. But yeah, from day one, it's been.
So now you have 180. You have 180 staff members now, and running around 12,000 on a weekend. And yet the principles that you're talking about are ones that can apply and are transferable in a smaller church too. But there's got to be that relationship between that lead associate, or in this case, the executive pastor, and that preacher.
Right.
So tell us how God kind of welded that together. You know how rare it is to hear an executive pastor or any associate working 33 years that closely with the senior pastor?
Yeah, I didn't realize how unique it was until the last 5 years, and now I've been searching. I can't find it. I cannot find a duo in any industry that's worked 33 years together, side by side. And it does just go back to a lot of our relationship, because I know early on, Dudley would hang out with his tribe. You know that tribe, that the senior pastors, and they all wanted wanted one of me. They all wanted executive pastor. And several of them tried. It didn't work because they weren't Dudley, and the person wasn't me. I mean, it was really has a lot to do with how God has wired Dudley and how God has wired me. Because from the day one, Dudley gave me full trust and authority over the staff, and told the staff that. I mean, got him in front of the entire staff and said, Tim's in charge. And we told them, I mean, our staff have heard for the last 30 years, you may never ever have an interaction with Dudley. Tim is the pastor over the staff, and that's who you'll deal with day in, day out. But there's several keys to what made that work. One, well, let me just give you, we call it the second chair leader. That's what you hear it referred to a lot. I think it was a orchestra director, Leonard Bernstein, one time was asked, what is the hardest instrument to play? What do you think the hardest instrument to play is, Dave?
Well, I have no idea.
Second fiddle.
Second fiddle?
Second fiddle, because I can find plenty of first fiddles. It's very difficult to find a second fiddle with enthusiasm. And that's kind of how God wired me. And I think of that second chair, I think of the chair having four legs. And, all four legs are important. I mean, you can balance on two legs. If you're really good, you can balance on one leg for a while. But you need all four legs to be able to sit in that chair consistently. And as that leadership level gets higher, that chair gets higher. But I describe those four legs as loyalty, trust, humility, and ability. And that first leg is the most important one, is loyalty. And I've been loyal to Dudley from before I got in the ministry. He basically led me back to the Lord, introduced me to my wife, married me and my wife. Just there's a lot of points in there. But so I'm very loyal to Dudley. I'm his biggest fan. I'm pulling for him. I'm encouraging him. And I think a lot of people think senior pastors get a lot of encouragement, but they don't really. So I try to do as much as I can. But one thing I want to point out, the loyalty one, is being truthful. Because part of loyalty is being truthful. And I'm really the only one on staff that can probably be in that position to go to Dudley and be honest and truthful with him, because I've earned that right. I think it was Colin Powell wrote a leadership book, or I heard him at GLS one time, and he was talking about loyalty, and he said, loyalty means giving me your honest opinion whether I like it or not. And I like that phrase. Loyalty is giving me your honest opinion whether I like it or not. And then he went on to say, but once the decision is made, the debate ends. And at that point, it becomes our decision. And I've lived by that motto the whole time. And I've been accused of being a yes man. A lot of words I've been accused of. And I say, yeah, that I am a yes man. Once Dudley and I discuss it and a decision made, then I am a yes man. And I don't look at that as a bad way. I look at it as a supportive way.
And I'm sure you've changed his mind countless times, and he's gone with what, some of that yes and that decision is him embracing something that you've helped him to see a different side of. The balance that you're talking about and the chemistry of an associate working with a pastor comes back to that loyalty piece in such a great way, but he also has to give you permission to speak into that. It's like that delicate balance between when a preacher asks for input or constructive criticism on a sermon. It's if a church has a teaching team and maybe you have more than one person, it's that give and take of, hey, will you read over my message, or what would you change after the first hour, or what's something that you notice it's a habit that I have that is really frustrating to people out there that I'm unaware of. Right. And it's the same way with what you're talking about. It's him giving you that responsibility, but him knowing that it's undergirded by that loyalty that you have for him, and that anything that you would say about him was something that you would say to his face, or that you have already said to his face.
Yeah. And I think the other important part about loyalty is I have to model it, because if I don't model it, the staff won't give it. If they see me not being loyal to Dudley, they're not going to be loyal to Dudley. And, you've heard pastors say this before. We have enough people in our church that aren't loyal to us. We're not going to pay people and staff to not be loyal. That's one thing we require is loyalty.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, Kyle Eidelman. Kyle worked with me for 16 years, and loyalty is the first word that I always say about him, because even when he would disagree with me on things, he would buy into it because he knew that I was seated in that seat.
Yeah.
And as we made our transition, it switched to me saying, I'm in your corner, I'm on your team, and I might give my opinion on something, but when he became the leader, I'm 100% behind it.
Right.
And if you show any doubt, or if you even waver a moment or raise your eyebrows or, well, I probably wouldn't have done it that way. And people will bait you into those things. Yep. If you're listening to this and you haven't heard my conversation with Kyle Idleman, go back and listen, because we talk a lot about the tension that comes between two strong personalities, and how it is that you can work together.
Yeah.
So loyalty is your first.
Yeah, the second one is similar. One side note: Dave stole Kyle from us. Kyle worked for us. He planted a church for us. Just want to get that in there.
That's true. We did. Yeah, and I feel terrible about it. Can't you tell? Just look at my face. Yeah. I feel terrible.
The second one is a similar to loyalty. It's called trust. And again, I think if you don't have trust as a second cheerleader, you're done. I mean, if he doesn't trust you, you might as well do something else. Dudley and I had a long history together. One thing about trust, I mean, Dudley trusts me unequivocally, trusts me with his church, trusts me with his family. There's just a huge amount of trust that has been built up over the years. I remember, this might seem silly, but years ago he was playing golf with a friend of ours, and it was four of us. I was behind him in a cart, and we played a hole, and his friend said, "Hey, Tim said he got a 4 on that hole, but he got a 6." And Dudley said, "He'll change his score, trust me." So we pulled the next hole, and sure enough, I walked up and said, "I got a 6 back there." And Dudley said, "See, I told you," because he knew that I was a trustworthy person. But
that's not silly.
No.
That's not silly. It's the little things like that show that, yeah, you are trustworthy.
One thing I will say to a first cheerleader out there is, don't make this hard for the second cheerleader. Dudley's got to allow me to come and tell him the truth without shooting me. Don't shoot the messenger, because if you shoot the messenger, they'll quit bringing the message, and then you're done. You, as a first cheerleader, you want the second cheerleader to be able to come to you and kind of give you the lay of the land and what's going on behind the scenes without feeling like they're going to get killed in the process. And again, that's important. The third leg is humility, and it's always weird to say you're humble, because then you're kind of not humble. But that's the way God wired me. I've just always been really confident in who I am and who I'm not. Growing up on a farm, great parents, it was always poured into me, and just always had a great confidence in myself. Matter of fact, my wife, we go to counseling, they'll say, "What first attracted you to Tim?" It was my confidence, not my good looks. I mean, I wish it would have been my body or my good looks. It was his confidence. But God wired me that way.
When you say that about humility, there's a really cool passage in 1 Peter where it's actually quoted several times in the Bible, but it says, God opposes the proud and he gives grace to the humble.
Right.
And so what I have to tell myself, because this is a constant ongoing battle with pride, and you hit the nail on the head just about the time you think, oh, hey, I think I've got it. Well, you're back to square one, right? Who was it, John Ortberg, that facetiously said, I'd like to have humility, but what if nobody notices? And but that phrase, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. When I choose arrogance, or when I choose pride, or to toot my own horn, or humble brag, or blatant arrogance, when I choose that, I am saying I am willfully desiring to be on the opposing team, and I want God on the other team, and I want to face off against him.
Right.
And nothing could be more ridiculous and ludicrous for me to say, oh, I don't want to be on his team.
Right.
And yet when I'm prideful, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Satan has his tactics and his ways, and probably the way he's got to me in this one, he knows I'm confident in who I am. But when you're in the second chair, the number of times you hear people say, well, I want to talk to the senior pastor. I want to talk to the real pastor. That type of stuff. It's just, you hear it over and over and over. Matter of fact, my wife, I didn't ask her if I could share this, but we have a great relationship. Early on, we would go places and somebody would say, ask me what I do. I'd say, I'm a pastor or a shepherd. And she would always follow with, well, he's not the pastor. I'm like, if only that's like the 100th time. I said, why do you always have to say the pastor? She goes, well, you're not. I go, I know that. We don't have to say the pastor. So she's got a way of keeping me humble too. But talking to that, I will say in that humility area, again, this is to the second chair leaders. If your desire is to be a first chair leader, if that's your desire, at least in the ministry, maybe the corporate world is different, but the ministry, if your desire is to be the first chair leader, it will sabotage your work as a second chair leader. The second chair leader is not a stepping stone to the first chair leader in most churches. It just sabotages it. I've seen countless train wrecks in churches. Again, I've been around a long time and counseled with a lot of people, and generally it's because that executive pastor wanted the senior pastor's job. And again, that's just not the general
I've seen
path.
the same thing.
So I've never had desire. Could I be a first chair leader?
I was going to say, did you ever want it?
No, I like being behind the scenes. I like, I preach once in a while. I like it, but it's going to sound weird. I like it too much because, people are always nice. It's like, oh, you did so good. You did so great. And then you start to think to yourself, well, maybe I did do really good. I really did great. Huh. But I keep remembering how much work I put into it and how much it took out of me to do it. I'm just not wired. I watch other guys do it. They do it, you, Kyle, people do it. Just seems like easily they do it. And it's just not my deal. Now, I can do a lot of other things easily that probably is a struggle for you guys that I can just do. But anyway, the fourth leg is, I don't know what to call it, but I call it ability. I mean, the first three legs kind of have to do with who you are. This last leg is what you do. I mean, there's certain things you need to be able to do as an executive pastor. Again, Mike Graham told me some of these things back in the day. I mean, I'm the gatekeeper to Dudley in many ways. I'm over the staff, the guy that's there beside Dudley whenever he's walking around just so he can hand people off to me. I can take over. I can pick up. I'm the guy he can go to about anything. I'm going to get it done, whether I do it or somebody else does it. That's just my job. I'm always the one going the second mile. I remember a Zig Ziglar quote where he said, "There's no traffic jams on the second mile." I know systems well. I know processes. We all have heard of C.H. Spurgeon. I think most people have, but most people haven't heard of James Spurgeon, who was his brother. And James was a systems guy, and C.H. would say, "I couldn't do what I do if James didn't do what he did." And Dudley is consistently telling me that
really,
Tim, I could not do what I do if you didn't do what you do. And it is true in our case because I'm pretty much running the day-to-day operations of the church. And there'll be, and I'm not suggesting this for anybody else, there'll be months where we don't talk to each other because I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm in my lane doing my things and he's doing his thing. Now, we can call each other anytime, day or night, but it's not like we have ongoing meetings. If we need to meet, we'll meet, but we just have that confidence and trust in each other. I have my abilities and he has his abilities.
But I want to go back to something you said because I don't want it to get lost and I don't want to get too far away from us in this conversation. If you are a lead pastor, then please say what Dudley says to Tim. And it means something to Tim. And it also helps them both stay in their lane and encourages them to continue this unusual relationship and this chemistry. And that was a phrase when you said, Dudley will say to me, "I couldn't do what I do if you didn't do what you do."
Mm-hmm.
And that might be one of the leading takeaways of our entire conversation today is because, you have to hear that encouragement. And so you might be a pastor and you're listening to this. You might be the preacher. And I want you to think about when was the last time that you said that to one of your associates? When was the last time you said that to an assistant or to your administrative assistant or to someone who's a lead volunteer in the church? Find 2 or 3 people this week that you can just go up to and say, "Hey, I was thinking this week, I couldn't do what I do if it weren't for you and you doing what you do."
Yeah.
Because I could never do what you do. You do it so well. And yet you allow me to be able to stay in my area of giftings. So I just didn't want that to get lost, Tim, because I think I'm so glad that you went through those 4 legs. I can't wait to share that with other people. By the way, that's a great thing for a staff meeting for you to share with people in the staff meeting sometime if you're listening to this.
Can I add one thing to that last thing you said? And people have heard this from a lot of people. I would encourage you, senior pastor, to write it down on a note. I don't care if it's scratchy, whatever. Say, Joe, I could not do what I do if you didn't do it. And write it down, because Joe will keep that note. He will keep that note forever. Right. Now, we tend to, you've heard this, we tend to give affirmation and kudos verbally. And we do just the opposite. We do, when we have to give criticisms or negative stuff, we want to write it down because we don't want to see the reaction. And just, you need to flip-flop that. Don't ever, you be willing to face them. If you're going to give them negative stuff, face them. Because you don't want them to keep that note forever. Because I've got a few of them. I got some from 30 years ago that I've got. And they're not helpful. But again, give them, if you're going to praise somebody, do it in written form, because they will keep it. You can do it verbally too, but it'll mean more to keep it. And then if you're going to criticize somebody or confront them, do it in person.
I can't believe you're saying that. We talk a lot on here about the value of a written note. Mm-hmm. And you can do that with a volunteer in your church. You can do that with a staff person that is often overlooked. And you're right, Tim. When you write it down, it means something. I've never thought about it from that juxtaposition of the flip-flop of we like to criticize and do it that way. And what if we flipped it and did our praise in written form?
You should.
So somebody's listening to this right now, and they're hearing you say, oh, I worked at the same place for 33 years. I actually worked with the same guy for 33 years, and they're struggling in year 3 or year 5, and yet we do know that there are some incredible benefits that come from longevity at a church and being on the same staff with the same people. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and were there ever some times where you said, well, I think I'm going to go do something else, or God's calling me elsewhere? You know, what was that like, and what would you say when it comes to longevity? What's the key to that?
You know, the interesting thing, Dave, was in year 3 of me being executive pastor, the business world called me back and gave me an incredible offer to move to Dallas and work for a large company. And we accepted the offer. My wife and I prayed about it. And
no, I didn't know this.
Went to Dudley and had been there 3 years. And I told Dudley, I said, we're getting called to Dallas. I believe God wants me to be with my family and raise my family in Dallas. And I still have the 3-page letter he wrote me, which was not kind. And I told him, I said, look, I'll work in the evenings for a year before I move. I'll do the business stuff in the evenings for a year. So we did that. As over that year's time, God showed me how important I was to Dudley's ministry and to the church. And I don't think I saw it before that. I think before that it was Dudley asking me to come work for him. I accepted that call, but in that time I accepted God's call and said, "No, I've got you here for a reason." And some incredibly exciting things happened after I decided to stay. And got to be where I was only leaving because of pride, because I'd gotten in front of the whole church, preached a sermon on why I was being called to Dallas. Because Dudley said, you have to do that. Well, then when I decided to stay, Dudley said, okay, you got to get and preach another sermon, tell them why you're staying. So I did that too. But pride is never a reason to make a decision. And that was the only reason I was going. So we decided to stay, and then it just shot up after. It was a roller coaster ride since then. God blessed us with the merger, and so many things happened right after I decided to stay. But are there days I've wanted to leave? Yeah, here's the interesting thing I found. The days I want to go do something else, there's nothing else to do. On the days when I'm really happy, I get all these opportunities. That's God, I think, protected me. I mean, God guided me and God directed me.
Well, you are a man who has great wisdom and discernment. And for you to say what you just said, that's when those opportunities come, and they don't come in those other seasons, shows great wisdom on your part.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's change gears. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Shepherd of the Hills. Mm-hmm. And the mayor of Los Angeles said that Shepherd of the Hills is the most diverse church in all of Los Angeles. That is not something that happened accidentally. It was something that you all have been very intentional about. Yep. It's a perfect picture of what heaven is going to be. I'd love for you to speak to that, because I know there are a lot of people listening who struggle with having diversity in their church, and yet it's been a long-term view that you all have had, and God has blessed that.
Right. Well, first, I think some people who struggle with diversity are in places where they're just not going to have diversity. I mean, there's nobody in their town. It's hard if you're not in a diverse community. Dudley will say your church should look like the local gas station, the local supermarket. But that goes back to, I'll give Dudley all the credit for that and God. It goes back to when we were 300. Dudley insisted on our stage being diverse. The stage. and didn't worry
With
about the
300
audience, but
people.
on the stage, the people singing on the stage, he insisted on diversity. And there were a lot of people who said, you can't do that. You can't force diversity. You can't make up diversity. Okay, we're just going to put diverse people on stage. And we had worship teams and people who didn't like that necessarily, but we have stuck by it to this day. I remember one time when one of our worship leaders back in the day said, okay, you're telling me if I have a white drummer and an African-American drummer and they're both same quality, I got to take the African-American drummer? Yeah, we do. That's what we're saying. So it was intentional. And what happens is that if the stage is diverse, when people walk in, they want to see somebody who looks like them up on the stage. So we've had many people come in and say the reason they kept coming was because they saw somebody who looked like them on the stage. So our stage is, to me, it led from our stage and from our senior pastor saying our stage needs to be diverse. We do it in all of our publications and things like that. So yeah, we've been very intentional about it. God has blessed us with that. Dudley is very evangelistic, does a lot of sports, so runs into a lot of people. And it's been a blessing. And diversity has been a blessing most of the time. I will be completely honest. During COVID, during George Floyd, it was very difficult. The much as we love the diversity, there was a lot of tension with that diversity. I mean, our church is probably half Democrat and half Republican. And that's there's tension there. But Dudley pretty much just walks down his path of where he's at, and people have kind of accepted who he is and what he believes, and they're comfortable being here. But
and he always brings it back to God's word.
100%.
You know, I think back to what was the proposition for gay marriage?
Prop 8
back
here in California.
Los Angeles. It was on the ballot.
Yeah, Prop 8. It was called Prop 8.
And you all took a very vocal and lead stance on that because it was a biblical issue and not because it was a political issue.
Right. We still took a lot of it. I mean, we still took a lot of attacks because the people would say, you know, that church doesn't love people because we were standing by the Bible. And it was, you know, all the news, all the press, that church just doesn't love people. Well, the mayor at the time, again, he didn't go to our church. He wasn't part of our church, although Dudley tends to bring them in and give them a Bible, every new mayor. So they are on our stage at least once. And
love it.
The mayor,
Love it. What an idea.
Yeah, the mayor stood up. Again, didn't agree with us theologically, but stood up and said, you can say whatever you want about that church, but you can't say they don't love people. That church loves people. And that comment goes back to about 6 months before that. We had a bad series of fires here in the valley, and we hosted probably 1,500 people here in our church. We let them live here with their cats, with their dogs, with their animals. We fed them. And the city was so surprised that we could do that. They were like, how in the world can you handle this? Like, well, we do it every weekend. We have that many people on our campus every weekend, so we kind of know how to do it. But yeah, that was a big thing. We've always been a big part of our community, letting the community use our church basically free of charge for the right things. And I think that gave us favor. When we went to build this building, people would tell us, you could never build that huge building in that area. It won't happen in LA. It just won't happen. And I remember we went to the city council and the planning thing. It was just one lady making a decision on all these projects. And the first 3 projects, you know, they presented, they were a pretty good deal. One was a cell tower. And she said, nope. She put her thumb down. And it was that quick. And Dudley and I were like, oh my word, this is not going to fly. So we got up to give this presentation, and she said, are you the church, are you Shepherd Church up in Port Aransas? We said, yeah. She goes, you're the church that let my neighborhood council, our homeowner association, use your building when nobody else would. I say yes. Why wouldn't I let you build that building? And it was smooth sailing from that point on. I was that God favor. But again, I think it was being that place for the community and being open to them. We have high holy days here, Dave, at our church. And some Christians don't like that. But we have high holy days here, and we do joint things with them. We've had a wailing wall we built up and did a service with them, have a great relationship with the rabbis. And that all comes from Dudley, our senior pastor, wanting to be that in the community and encouraging us to do it.
But if you can have a mayor saying exactly what Jesus said in John 13 is how Christians should be known, by your love, all people will know that you're my disciples. If you've got the mayor of Los Angeles, not as a believer, saying you can say what you want about them, but I'll tell you this, you can't say they don't love people. Yeah. What a ringing endorsement of what the church is supposed to be. I would love for somebody to say that about any church that I'm associated with. What a powerful statement that had to be. I want to ask you a little bit about reading and books, because I know we have assistants who are leaning in right now and listening, executive pastors, associates, people who are core volunteers. What are some books that help you that you would suggest for those who aren't in the lead role and that could be helpful to them?
Well, one is 60 Simple Secrets Every Pastor Should Know by Dave Stone. I've had this book for years. I can't recommend
dude, I haven't
that
seen
enough.
that. I haven't seen that. Did you buy that in a yard sale? Where did you find that? That was probably 20 years ago, and it's probably cost you a nickel.
And that's been on my bookshelf ever since. It's got great. There's the same 60 Simple Secrets. I'm telling you, they're all good. But fast forward to today, one book I recommend to a lot of people is called Managing Leadership Anxiety: Yours and Theirs by a guy named Steve Cuss. I was given that book during COVID, which is one of the craziest times that we've ever ministered through. And I had all the feelings everybody else had. I knew I couldn't make a right decision. There was no right decision. It was all going to fall on me. I mean, I remember Dudley saying, we're going to do this, and if they want to take me to jail, they can take me to jail. And the weekend after that, I preached. I'm like, wait a second. I'm going to be the one to say it. But it all worked out. But that book.
Well, he knows what to say. He also knows when to say it. So now let me stop you right there, because am I correct that there were, I think, 3 churches in the state of California who defied the governor's order and said, we're going to go ahead and have worship next week?
Yeah, there were 2 that, Jack Hibbs is one. He didn't ever really stop. We did stop for a couple weeks. But then we came back, and they basically fined us every week $5,000 for meeting. They said, we're going to find, and we were doing everything. We were doing spacing. We did everything you could humanly do to make it safe. And I think the final straw for our leadership in Dudley was when they said they wanted us to meet outside, which was hot. And they said, you can't sing songs and you can't pray. Like, okay, we're done. So we started meeting back inside, got fined every week. Eventually, MacArthur sued the state and won. So we went back after that and said, we're going to sue you too. So they gave us all our money back. But we paid fines every week for meeting. But again, we knew
if I'm remembering correctly, didn't they come and Dudley had said, hey, you're not welcome on this property if that's what you're coming to do. Yeah. So we'll meet you right here and we'll hand you a check. Am I remembering that correctly?
You remember part of it correctly. It wasn't Dudley, it was me. Dudley was in the green room, but yes, I would.
Oh, I thought it was the pastor.
No, I'd meet. I would meet them when they walked up, and the council had told me it won't be a problem. They'll just say, okay, thank you, signed here, and they'll walk off. And it was. They were Christian people. The ones who were coming, inspectors who were coming, said they didn't like to do this, but they had to, and I would sign the thing, and they'd send me the bill, and I'd pay the bill. But again, it was a time when we felt like we couldn't, and we lost a lot of people during that time because some of them thought we shouldn't have stopped at all. Some of them thought we shouldn't be wearing masks. It was a no-win situation. And we did lose people. Most have come back now. But I remember I felt like I could not make a right decision in that situation. I really didn't.
Well, no one could. And you hacked off 1/3 of the people. 1/3 of the people were ambivalent, and 1/3 of the people agreed with you. So that was what it was.
We saw people today come back and say, hey, I've not been since COVID. Really? That's amazing. Yeah. But our frustration was across the street. The liquor stores were open. Walmart was open. Everything was open. And we're not considered essential, But I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there. But this book, Managing Leadership Anxiety, has really what got me through that time. And it's one of my favorite books today. Again, Steve Cuss wrote it. I recommend it for anybody because our world is full of anxiety today. I mean, it's just more so than I ever remember. Anxiety is a big deal, and that's a good book on that. Another book I've been reading a lot of, and somebody gave this to me. It's called Strength to Strength. When I first started reading it, I put it down and did not like it. I was mad because it basically kind of says after 40, you're done. You're done, kind of done. And I didn't like that. But they were talking about athletes, artists, all after 40. They're not really producing a lot of new stuff. But then it gets into your strength really isn't what you know. this crystallized intelligence. And so I'm embracing that now. I'm leaning more into being a mentor, sharing things. I'm 62, Dave. I'm getting ready to transition. I'm never going to retire. I'm just going to transition. And my value is in what I know and what I've learned and the history I've had. That's my value. And as long as people want to listen to me and ask me questions, I'll share it with them and hopefully save them some angst and some frustration. So, yeah, entering a really sweet season of life.
That second book is you said From Strength to Strength.
My guy named Arthur Brooks. He's I think a Harvard professor.
Good. Especially if it talks about those different seasons of life.
Yep.
I want to wrap up because I know that you went through a health crisis, unexpected, a little over a year ago. Coincidentally, I had just been at your church. And I think this happened like a day or two later. I hope I didn't send you into this, but give us the short version of what happened and what God's taught you from that.
I heard Max on your program a few weeks ago, and he was mentioning
Max Lucado did great.
He was mentioning something. What I have too. I have a ascending aortic aneurysm, and I have a bicuspid leaky aortic valve. So there's something they watch every year. And I had a pacemaker put in 2 years ago, all heart things. So I guess probably the thing God taught me is just how fragile life is. Because when I remember going in for one of my tests, and the doctor said, "Well, you got an aortic aneurysm." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, the good side is that you're going to die really quick. I mean, you're just going to go to sleep." I go, "Okay, good to know."
Well, thank you.
And he said, "Unless you're in a hospital, you're probably going to die." Not comforting things, but okay. This made me think of the preciousness of life and living each moment. And just, kind of a motto in my life and for our church day, people sometimes say, what makes shepherds so successful? And Dudley would say first, and I'd say right behind him, is we just keep showing up. Dudley is not the number one preacher in the world, but he's very, very good. Not the number one leader in the world, but we, for 33 years, have just kept showing up every day. And I want to do that in life. I want to show up every single day, whether that's with my grandson, who I'm going to see later on today, whether it's with my family, whether it's with a coworker. I was just with two pastors from across the country. We got together for a couple of days just to be with each other, just to show up for each other. Because you can easily start binging out on Netflix and checking out on things, checking out. I want to be in the moment every day and be present and just keep showing up.
Well, you've done that faithfully for over 3 decades, and God has blessed your efforts. And not only at Shepherd, but you have been an inspiration to a lot of other churches. And let me tell you, you've helped the XP that I worked with, Tim Hester, for years.
Love
and
Tim.
A lot of different XPs that I know around the country, just because they feel a kindred spirit with you, and your longevity and your loyalty to Dudley is second to none. I've never seen anything like it. And you're going to lead the way into heaven because of your servant's heart, and you play second fiddle incredibly well, my friend.
Thanks, there.
Love you,
Love
Tim.
you too. It's been great being with you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I'm the guy behind the guy. That's how Tim describes his calling as executive pastor, working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly so that the lead pastor can focus on preaching and vision. He's done a great job of that. But what truly defines Tim's leadership is not just what he does, but it's how he does it. And I think my takeaways are the 4 legs of that second chair that he spoke of. And he talked about loyalty. And I wrote this down. It means being honest and fully supportive, even when it's tough. And once a decision's made, you back it 100%. That's also good advice for those of you who are on an elder board who might be listening. You might have a disagreeing thought on an opinion on a decision that's being made, but still, at the end of the day, when you walk out of that room, you're one team and you're united. And I love that loyalty piece. The second part that he talked about, that leg, is trust. To Tim, trust is everything. It's built daily through honesty and through consistency and creating a safe space where truth can be shared. Then humility is that third piece. It means knowing that your role isn't about the spotlight or the title, but serving faithfully in the background. And I'll throw a caveat there that it's not about the spotlight for the lead pastor either. And I think that goes without being said. But there is an understanding when you're an assistant or an associate or an executive pastor that you are there to advance the mission of the church, and leading that directional move is the lead pastor in saying, this is the direction that we're going to go. And so you need to have that humble spirit. And then the fourth piece, just the ability. And Tim has a unique ability to be able to be not just supportive, but also to ensure that the systems work and that problems get solved. And I love that James Spurgeon illustration. I'd never heard that before. And that's something I think that you all will be able to use and that I'll be able to use as well. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to working as a team. We've heard that phrase, teamwork makes the dream work. But that's more than just a catchphrase. It really is all of us understanding that we have a role within the church and within our church leadership and ministry leadership. The story that I want to share with you, for those of you who are baseball fans, you'll remember the name Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson played for the New York Yankees. He played for the Oakland A's as well. But he had a short stint at the end of his career with the Baltimore Orioles. And he played under the manager by the name of Earl Weaver. And Earl Weaver had some unique rules on his team. One of his rules was you couldn't steal a base without getting the steal sign from him in the dugout first. Now, this was an affront to a temperamental ego like Reggie Jackson, who struggled with pride issues, his own words, not mine. But Reggie didn't like the fact that someone else could control when he wanted to steal a base. And he really wasn't even a base stealer. But one time he took a lead off of first base, and he thought he could get to second without being thrown out. He did not get the steal sign from Earl Weaver, but he took off anyway. He slid into second base, and he barely beat the tag, and he got the safe call. And he stood up, and he just kind of brushed his jersey off as he kind of glared at Earl Weaver in the dugout like, I know what I'm doing here. But after the game was over, Earl Weaver pulled Jackson aside. He said, Reggie, he said, I want to tell you why you didn't get the steal sign. He said, at the plate was Lee May. Lee May was the second strongest power hitter on their team at that time. They called him the Big Bopper from Birmingham. And Lee May was at the plate. But when you stole second base, that left first base open, and they intentionally walked him so that they'd be able to get a force out or maybe a double play. The next batter that was coming up to bat had not had any success against this pitcher. And so I had to put in a pinch hitter for him. That left us with insufficient bench strength should the game go into extra innings, which it did. And I think that's why we lost the game. Do you see the difference? Reggie Jackson wanted to steal a base. Earl Weaver wanted to win a baseball game. And when you are in Christian ministry, you have to put your own desires aside for the good of the entire team. And that's what Earl Weaver was trying to get across. Now, I don't know if in this story and in your ministry, you are the Reggie or you're the Earl Weaver, whether you're the one that's supposed to accept what is given to you, or if you're the person who is calling the shots. But either way, it's an illustration of how we need to work together. And one thing is for sure, if you have that humble spirit and you're more wrapped up in advancing the mission of the church rather than your own personal stats or building your own empire or kingdom or following, if you're more wrapped up in making Jesus' name famous than your own name famous, then that's when you're going to succeed, is when you're making Jesus' name famous. But if you get wrapped up in making your own name famous, then that's when your ministry is going to crumble. Oh, it might not crumble quickly, but it will crumble. Teamwork does make the dream work, especially if it's God's dream and not man's dream, and especially if it's advancing the mission of the church and not your own mission. Well, pastors, this coming October, Focus on the Family has something special for you and your spouse. It's our Pastors Couples Conference, and it's designed to be 3 days of rest, encouragement, and spiritual renewal for you. I went to this last October. My wife and I did, and we thoroughly loved it. This year's theme is the joys of serving together. We're going to celebrate the unique calling and shared joy of serving in ministry together alongside of your spouse, because they are a big part of what you do. And through practical sessions, meaningful conversations, biblical insight, couples will be equipped to lead with unity, to guard their marriage, and to find renewed joy in the mission that they share. And guess what? We're going to be doing a live taping of Pastor to Pastor with Dave Stone. We're going to do it live at the conference. So bring your spouse, come join me. There's going to be a lot of great speakers. I can't wait to hear them. I promise you, you will not be disappointed if you spend those 3 days with us in October. To register, click the link below in our show notes or head over to the focusedpastor.org. Focused, F-O-C-U-S-E-D, pastor.org. Well, thanks for joining us on the journey. Every Tuesday, we drop a brand new conversation on Pastor to Pastor. It's designed to encourage, inspire, and to challenge you, because leadership can be lonely. And we call this Pastor to Pastor for a reason. It's to remind you you're not alone. So until next time, I'm Dave Stone. God bless.